Bueno, muy buenas tardes a todos. Les doy una cordial bienvenida. Quiero compartir mi alegría por el interés en la actividad del día de hoy, que se realiza en el marco del Seminario de Sociología Jurídica del Instituto de Investigaciones Jurídicas y Sociales Ambrosio Lucas Gioja, y que tiene como expositora principal a la profesora Ulrike Schultz. Les quiero decir que esta actividad está siendo grabada y después de mi presentación les vamos a dar las indicaciones para aquellos que no sepan utilizar la función del intérprete, o que ustedes puedan elegir escuchar en español o en inglés a Ulrike y a Pablo Aba, que hará de moderador. Un agradecimiento muy especial a las autoridades del Instituto Gioja, a la Oficina de Comunicaciones de nuestra facultad, y muy especialmente a Patricio Sermo, estudiante graduado de nuestra facultad, por su disponibilidad para traducir la exposición de Ulrike del día de hoy. Como muchos saben, el seminario se constituye en un espacio desde donde se desarrollan distintas actividades vinculadas a la sociología jurídica, proponiendo diálogos, análisis, reflexiones, con la participación de reconocidos y destacados sociólogos y sociólogas del derecho. Hoy nos ocuparemos de las profesiones jurídicas y de las ocupaciones jurídicas. Este tema ha sido objeto de estudio y eje central de la sociología y de la sociología del derecho. Desde la década de los 70 viene creciendo a nivel mundial. Se ha estudiado cómo los atributos y características de la profesión jurídica repercuten directa e indirectamente en la práctica jurídica, y cómo influyen variables como la educación, la cultura y la formación profesional en estas prácticas. Para quienes nos dedicamos a la sociología jurídica, las investigaciones empíricas producidas a nivel académico en Alemania, en particular a través de reconocidos profesores de diferentes universidades, se ha convertido en referentes por sus enfoques y metodologías, y son parte de los avances teóricos sobre las profesiones jurídicas. Entre ellos, quiero recordar al profesor de Bremen, Rüdiger Lautmann, y su libro Sociología y Jurisprudencia, donde señala la pérdida del estatus de la profesión del jurista y explica que esto se debe a la opinión pública que se tiene de él, resaltando asimismo la importancia de la sociología como instrumento de trabajo del jurista, ya sea en la creación, aplicación y práctica del derecho. También recordar el trabajo del profesor de la Universidad de Berlín, Oberrätin, y su trabajo sobre sociología de las ocupaciones jurídicas, producido sobre la base del análisis de realidades contemporáneas de Alemania. Y especialmente recordar a Volmar Gessner, en particular por sus gestiones y aportes en el desarrollo del Research Committee on Sociology of Law, del cual actualmente Ulrike es presidenta, y en especial también a Volmar por la creación o la participación activa en la creación del Instituto Internacional de Sociología Jurídica, y por sus estudios sobre administración de justicia. Vale una mención al maestro Renato Treves, fundador del Research Committee, al igual que a su discípulo Vincenzo Ferrari, quienes han puesto el énfasis en los estudios sobre los jueces y la administración de justicia, y particularmente las investigaciones sobre la profesión del abogado y la formación del jurista. En el ámbito académico latinoamericano se destacan las investigaciones de Germán Silva García, de María Inés Bergoglio, de nuestro querido profesor Felipe Fusito y su equipo de investigadoras, que han hecho un relevamiento cuantitativo y cualitativo excelente sobre el perfil del abogado bonaerense. Los trabajos de María Eugenia Gostiasoro y Daniela Saikowski. Se cuenta presente en la actividad del día de hoy la profesora Beatriz Cohen. Quiero recordar así su trabajo reciente sobre mujeres profesoras de Derecho en la UBA, escrito en coautoría con una profesora de nuestra facultad, María de los Ángeles Ramallo, y con Sonia Ariza Navarrete, en una publicación cuya compilación estuvo a cargo de Ulrike y que también fuera publicada en la revista Academia de nuestra facultad, y en Oñati, en la revista de series de Oñati on Law and Society, en el año 2019. En nuestra Universidad de Buenos Aires la cuestión de género se le ha reconocido el estatus académico mediante la creación del Instituto Interdisciplinario de Estudios de Género, y nuestra Facultad de Derecho cuenta con el programa Género y Derecho. También quiero recordar el trabajo que, al abordar la prevalencia de problemas jurídicos desde la perspectiva de género, fuera presentado por el profesor Ulrike Schultz en este seminario en el marco de la actividad sobre mapa de acceso a justicia en Argentina. Hoy Ulrike nos presentará sus contribuciones al tema de género y profesiones jurídicas, respecto del cual es una especialista destacada a nivel internacional. Un agradecimiento muy especial a Ulrike por aceptar ser parte de este seminario y de esta manera enriquecerlo y enaltecerlo. Indudablemente sus contribuciones al tema de género y profesiones legales serán de fundamental importancia. En este momento le voy a pedir a Pablo Aba, I will ask to Professor Pablo Aba to introduce Ulrike. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Laura. It's not easy to introduce Ulrike Schultz in few minutes. She has been so active and her work is so extended that it's almost impossible to introduce her without forget something. So sorry, Ulrike, if I forget something, because your works for the disciplines are really extended and great. We can start by saying that Ulrike Schultz is a lawyer, and she is retired as a senior academic at the FernUniversität Hagen. For 30 years, she was the head of the law faculty, specialized in European law, the sociology of legal profession, and question of gender and law. With Gisela Shaw, she has edited a comprehensive international collection on women and the worlds of legal profession, 2003, women in the judiciary, 2012, gender and judging, 2013, and gender and judicial education, 2016. She has been a member of the International Socio-Legal Group of the Comparative Studies of Legal Professions since its inception in 1980. And she has been a chair of the group from 2010 to 2014. But she's not only an academic, she is an European Union ethics consultant and registered as a consultant for the European Gender Institute. She has been working as a consultant for many institutions and NGOs like the Human Rights Institute of the OSCE and the GIZ, the German Foreign Ministry branch for development in emerging democracies. In 2018, she was elected president of the Research Committee for the Sociology of Law in the International Sociological Association. As I say, the CV shows a life dedicated not only to the academic and research, but compromise with policy making and practice. Ulrike, thank you again for accept our invitation, and we are ready for your presentation.
Oh, now the interpreting has been finished. I got a sign that the interpreting has been finished. Okay.
Don't worry. Don't worry. We solved that.
Okay.
You keep
you
going.
deal with that. I just wanted to tell you in case you don't get the sign. Yeah. So I was one of well, the early women in law in Germany. Not really the pioneer generation. I would say the pioneer generation was before the Second World War, but this was just a handful of women. But my generation was really the generation who had to break the boards, as I said, the path for all those other women who wanted to get into legal occupations. So being in a minority position, you think a lot about what you do and what your professional life is like. And being a child of the year 68, I've started to study in 66, and in 68 we had the students' revolution in Europe, and at that time we got a liking for sociology, and also then for sociology of law. And being a child of that time, I got a liking for it, and so I combined my interest in the situation of women in the legal profession, or overall the legal profession, and the social legal aspects. I became in 1980 part of a group working on the legal professions worldwide, which later really became notorious or famous, a group which was led by Rick Abel from UCLA in California and Philip Lewis from the UK. And after our meeting, we had a really notorious meeting in Bellagio, everybody's citing it still in 1984, and after that they published 3 volumes on lawyers in society. I was the reporter for Germany, and we had many sessions in a serious room with serious discussions at that meeting. And one evening Rick said, this evening we could go to the garden and have a nice discussion about women in the legal profession. So this is the picture when we were talking in a leisurely atmosphere about women in the legal profession. Alas, quite a few of those sitting there have already died, so it also makes me quite nostalgic to see this picture. Well, and at that leisurely meeting, I thought someone has to deal with the subject. But at that time, I was still young and I did not feel important enough. I tried to recruit Carrie Menkel-Meadow to launch comparative work on women in the legal profession with me. But somehow this did not work. And in 1994, my colleagues at another meeting of the Legal Profession Group, which became an institutionalized working group of the Research Committee for the Sociology of Law, in 1994, my colleagues convinced me, now you have to do it. Okay, and so I started extensive networking and then extensive research on women in the legal profession and also in comparative perspective. You have heard of the big volumes I've edited. I think one is gone here. So the first big comparative volume, it was always really big volumes of 500 pages and 28 contributions on women in the world's legal professions. Then in 2003, 10 years later, someone had convinced me to do another big volume on gender and judging. Oh no, here it is, gender and judging, right here. Yeah. The last big volume I've done is on women in the legal academy, about women law professors. This was 2021. Basically, after the first volume, I thought I would never be able to do another of these big volumes. It's so strenuous to organize all these networks, keep people going. And when we started, well, at our times, we already had internet and email. In the old project, in the 80s, we were still writing by hand or typewriters and sending mails by snail mail. But still, women at the time when we started, and that was in the second half of the 90s, it was very difficult to find women specialized in issues of the legal profession and sociology of law worldwide. This has changed completely. Now there are many women working on the subject, and we have a flood of publications in the field, which gives us a very rich picture of the situation of women in law all over the world. And as you've heard, I'm not only an academic, I'm also a practitioner in the sense that I've been involved in a lot of further education, particularly for lawyers and the judiciary. And so I always had the subject of my research before my eyes, and I could do research and doing my further education. And I'm a communications trainer mediator, and so I could combine these issues with my research. Here I've added some pictures of the big books. These are the 3 big books. And then we also have Routledge books, several ones, Women in Law. This one is about gender and judicial education. And they were based on special issues of the International Journal of the Legal Profession. I think meanwhile, I've done 6 of these issues, and I always must say a very big thank you to my co-editor Gisela Shaw. Gisela has done all the language work on these volumes and these special issues. And without Gisela, we would not have all this work and couldn't do all these comparative work. And here I've also inserted a picture of the book Lawyers in 21st Century Society, which is a kind of revisiting of the old Abel Lewis project. And this time we are a team of 4 editors, and the 4 editors are, again, Rick Abel. He will be 80 in September. Hilary Summerlet, Ola Hammerslave, and myself. So you may well understand that I'm very busy, because my English side, of course, is only one side. I'm German, and I'm doing a lot in Germany. And we are just about to finalize, you see here, volume 1, national reports, and now we are about to finalize volume 2 with comparative evaluations of the findings of the national reports, and of course adding competence and flavors of different authors we have recruited for that volume. So here you get a view of my national empirical research. I've done a very big project on women in leading positions in the judiciary in North Rhine-Westphalia, the federal state where I'm living. And this is my last funded project on women de jure et de facto, women in the legal academy in Germany. And that was the first one that I've done about women in law. That was 1990. So you see, I've done a lot of things here. I have a lot of competence. And my problem is today to bring it all in a brief frame and well, because you may well imagine that I could talk for weeks and almost months about all these subjects. So the story I'm going to tell is a story of choices, question mark, as the story of access to the legal occupations for women. And I've put the question mark behind choices because the question always is how much choice, rational choice is there, and how much women were pulled or driven somewhere. And a story of voices, that will be the shorter part, a question which had worried us a lot in the 80s and 90s, the question if women change the profession. Because if a professional field is feminized, so what happens to that field? Are women different? And so will they add some difference to the field, considering judges? Will they judge differently? Or will the practitioners work in a different way? And in the legal academy, is there also a different kind of teaching law and educating the young generation? You are still studying or in postgrads may well think about it, what your notion is of these issues. And in comparing, of course, you always have to see the many differences you have to deal with, but around underlying and throughout you find similarities. And I'll try to deal with both. Till the 1990s, the sociology of law I was in, when I went to meetings, etc., that was a story of the Western world. at the time, it was very difficult to recruit colleagues from other continents, except from North America. We got a little from Latin America, one person from Japan, but it was difficult enough to get her. Africa, nothing. Well, Australia, yeah. And so, as I said, many things have changed, and now we can really do global projects. And the subjects are dealt with all over the world, in all continents of the world. A subject of particular interest has always been, I'd never thought of that, this gender and judging. And a couple of years ago, I was included in a project on women judges in Muslim courts of law. A very new project was about the feminization of the judiciary in the Asia Pacific. The book comes out at the end of this year, edited by Melissa Crouch. And next week, I will go to Bergen in Norway for a project, Women on the Bench, Gendered Experiences of Female Judges in 5 Fragile States. One from Latin America, Guatemala, also Haiti, Afghanistan, Angola, and Uganda. Some of them really failed states. So you see, the kind of work we've done has changed, which is enormous. You get a very rich knowledge of countries, politics in these countries, and the legal system and the situation of women in the legal profession there. We also have rich theoretical frameworks, drawing on the theory of the professions, organizational theory, management theory about careers, feminist theory, what's the special situation of women? What about women in the legal profession? Sexual economics theory, and then, as it is true international work, including historians, including even people from religious studies, we also get some part of the methodological and theoretical repertoire from their disciplines. Now, let me start with a brief account of the history of women in the legal profession. This is the Western history, but we can start with the Western history because that's spilled then in a sense over the world. And the history really started with the French Revolution. That's the first thing we have to mention, 1789, with the creation of the modern state. You will know the French Revolution was about liberty, equality, brotherhood. Liberté, égalité, fraternité. And it was about the individual rights for individuals. That was the new thing about the French Revolution and why it was the founding hour of the modern state. But this constitution was drafted by men, and brotherhood meant men. Women were not men. And in the course of the 19th century, when we had the nation building in Europe and also in America, Latin America, North America, women did not get civic rights in the grand legislative projects of the time. And they were legally subordinate to fathers and husbands. They had no access to higher education. And of course, without it, they couldn't get admission to professions. And in the 19th century, in fact, the professions in the modern sense were created. In Germany, for example, we got the Act on Lawyers, which is still the basis for today's Act on Lawyers, in 1878. But no chance for women in Germany to study law at the time. The first possibilities, amazingly, were in Switzerland, in Zurich, around that time, although Switzerland only gave the right to vote to women much, much later than most other countries in the world. So, as an example, let me tell you the story of women in the legal profession in Germany. women had to fight for it step by step. And the first admission to law faculties happened between 1900 and 1908, but then they were not allowed to take examinations. In Germany, we need 2 state examinations, a first, and after practical training, a second state examination. And then we had the First World War. And revolutions and wars always recreate the work. It's terrible to say that, but this always is a possibility for fundamental changes in society. So after the First World War, which ended in 1918, we got what we call a Weimar Constitution. Weimar is a city in Germany. The constitution was made there. We call the political phase in Germany the Weimar Republic in 1919. And women got civic rights and the suffrage. In England, we'd had the suffragette movement since 1880. And now finally in Germany, women got the right to vote. But still men try to prevent women to get into the legal profession. And the arguments for exclusion were based on gender stereotypes. Women are too emotional, can't be objective. And lawyers, particularly judges, have to be objective. Without it, we don't have just judgments. And some good friends of women said, women are too good for the hard tasks lawyers have to perform. But of course, women also were unwanted competitors in a bourgeois male breadwinner model. And in the 1920s, we had economically hard times after the First World War, and we had the economic crash around the world. And so the competitor argument was quite a strong argument. And so, and then it still needed, with a lot of pressure from the women we had. And of course, when women had the right to vote, they could also be elected. And so we had 8% of women in our parliament, and they achieved a law for the admission of women to legal professions. That was in 1922, and the first, and then only then women could do the practical training and be admitted to the judiciary or the legal profession. In 1933, when the Nazis took over, we had 252 women of 18,000 lawyers. And in the judiciary, it was something like 2 or 3% of women. So really just a small figure of legally qualified women. Although they were very active in educating other women in legal questions. And then the situation got worse, because the agenda of the Nazis was to have a very male state, and women were meant to breed heroes. And so in 1936, Hitler himself passed a decree to exclude all women from legal occupations. And when the Second World War started in 1939, there was no practicing woman lawyer left, not admitted. Some were sitting in the back room and working there. Of course, these made it very difficult for women in the legal profession in Germany to gain ground after the Second World War. But it was not much better in other countries. Also, as I said, due to the economic circumstances, and also the World War hit the world globally, and did not give favorable conditions to women to try and get entrance into the legal occupations. In Germany, then, we had very conservative family images, and up to this day, we have to deal with these conservative family images in Germany. We had a celibacy clause in the civil service, and when up to 1954, a woman, be it a judge or in another position in the civil service, married, she had to quit the service. And we had discussions about double income couples till well into the 80s. So they, I have to move this. Then in the further course of the 20th century, as I said, at first we had the exclusion, and then there was a lot of rejection, discouragement, and oppression. And women needed the right to vote, the civic status, to get positions as judges or as public prosecutors. And this is very interesting. I told you in Germany, women got the right to vote in 1919. In France, only after the Second World War. In Italy, in 1963. In Portugal, after the Salazar regime in 1978. And so this is why in these countries, women could get admission as lawyers already after the turn of the century, from the 19th to the 20th century, but not admission as judges or prosecutors. In common law countries, the story was a little different. There, the problem was not to get the right to vote, but in common law countries, we had, particularly in England and then Australia, the Commonwealth countries, that women could only, that judges were admitted, chosen from experienced practitioners, and experienced practitioners were between 40 or 50 or even older. And so it took much longer for women to get there. And of course, there was also a lot of male culture and gatekeeping by the men who were there. In the USA, it was a little earlier, so we cannot really include the USA into the story of other common law countries. In common law countries, one hurdle to take was that women were not considered as persons. And so it needed special persons acts saying that person in the sense of legal regulations include women. And these persons acts were only passed between the end of the 19th century and the early decades of the 20th century. And it needed a lot of explicit statutory regulations. But as I said, in the first half of the 20th century, the progress was still very slow, and it only gained in speed in the 70s and 80s. Now I have to see as one slide has disappeared. Yeah, okay. So for the project on women in the legal academy, I've put together tables with comparative data of first women admitted to law faculty, taking a law degree, being admitted. Whoop, I have the problem here with these. How do I get rid of this? Wait a minute, sorry for that. I put it here, it's better there. So first female lawyer admitted, first female judge admitted, first female academic. And so if you look down the first column, you see, I also take the second part of it. Yeah, you see that somewhere between 1880 and 1920, most countries gave the possibility to women to be admitted to law faculties. The first lawyer to be admitted happened a little later. The first judge to be admitted in some countries much later, as I said. And here we have the interesting situation that just in these countries where women were admitted very late, like France, Spain, Portugal, Italy, women became a majority of judges very soon. Because in almost all countries of the world, we have had the situation of an enormous increase of women in legal studies. In almost all countries, they outnumber men now. And so, of course, there is a pressure of women to get into these professional fields. And another and rather difficult story is that about the female legal academics. I will come to details a little later. So I told you, comparing is not so easy. It's about differences and similarities. As I said, we have common law countries and civil law countries. We have mixed systems, and also in the civil law countries, we have Germanic and Roman law elements, which were quite different. Then we have the former socialist countries, which had a completely different structure of society and structure of the legal occupations. And the differences are in law, the legal system, and the structure of the profession. So all this is due to historical development and has to be seen in the context of the geopolitical systems. Then we had globally different influences in law, legal system and academic system through occupying powers, colonialism, and this is the subject which is dealt with all the time now, and colonialism and its consequences is the subject of the Lisbon conference, the big international social legal conference we are going to have in Lisbon next year. But we've also had a reception of law, for example, in Turkey, in China, in Japan, etc. And so we've had German, French, Spanish, Dutch, of course, Latin America, a lot of Spanish, then Dutch, Russian influence floating around the world and influencing the system. In Africa, MENA, Middle Eastern, North African countries and Asian countries, we also have influences, frictions through traditional and religious law. So you see how difficult it is to compare. And this is why I've said I have to give some information about Germany to have some tangible elements in what I'm presenting here. And then we have structural differences in the profession. And one very important difference is about the social status. When I came to England as a young woman to study English law there, or I was qualified in my country already, and then they told me, what the hell are you doing in the legal academy? Why don't you practice? So the legal academy in England was of low reputation. Then the situation was, still until the 80s and longer. Till the 80s, only half of the solicitors, one branch of the legal profession, had an academic qualification, and most of them had a legal degree in whatever subject, philosophy, history, or whatever. And teaching was seen as some preparation for practice, and it was mainly done part-time by practitioners. So you see, there are enormous differences between the system. And also in the training, the Roman law-based countries do a lot of theoretical instruction. As I said, the common law world has always had a focus on practice. And as to the judges, in the common law world, we have a meritocratic system. The civil law world has career judges, and career judges means you know that from your country, you take a law degree, maybe like in Germany, also a degree after a practical training, and then you may enter the legal profession or the judiciary at before your 30th birthday. Meritocratic system means, as I've said, that the judges are chosen from experienced practitioners. Then different cultures. In some countries we have split professions, barristers, solicitors. In the Romanic world we had avocat or abogado, procurador. Then we have differences in the structures of law firms. In the Anglo-American world, you have more big law firms than in other countries, a functional differentiation. in the work. And as it comes to court work, you have on the one hand side the adversary system and the Roman law-based inquisitorial system with the strong position of the judge, the adversary system with the judge like an arbiter. And no, this stupid thing doesn't go away. And we also have different models of notaries. I've just launched a new project on notaries, and this is a very interesting story. So if someone of you is interested in being involved in this project, please write me an email. So the situation today is we've had this enormous feminization of the legal profession. It's due to the situation that beginning with the 60s and 70s, countries became more affluent, and that meant that they also could invest or wanted to invest into higher education for women. So we have more highly qualified women now, and we say that women have moved from fringe dwellers to a majority in the legal profession, or to a fair share, but at the basis. As I said, more than 50% of law students are women, and the situation, but still the situation is that we have a glass ceiling, a sticky floor, or however you want to call it, meaning that the career chances for women are not as good as for men. So I will talk a little about women lawyers, judges, academics, and then about what do women add to the to the professions. Do they change the professions? So this picture shows you the ratio of women to men law students, which is in Germany almost 3:2. In other countries, even more women, in some a little less, but the picture shows it well. In Germany, the average gender composition in law firms is one woman of 4 partners in let me call it normal law firm. We do have, meanwhile, 35% of women in law firm, and with admissions, 50% of the newly admitted are women. But the number of graduates has gone down enormously in Germany, and so the share of women in the legal profession only rises very slowly now, because very few men and women lawyers are admitted these days, and so the numbers can't change right now. And where are the other women between 25% and 35%? They work as individual practitioners with all, well, some advantages, but many drawbacks as an individual practitioner. And this picture shows you the share women have in big law firms. 1 woman, 9 men. In partner position. I will give you a picture about the differences between the different stages in big international law firms. And this is also a gender composition in a normal local law firm. This is one, I checked the website for firms in my city, in Hagen, and here we have this 6 smiling men. Now, women lawyers in legal practice, the overall similarities globally. Entering of the profession. There is a lot of importance of academic capital and social capital. Academic capital is the basis, but in Germany and in many countries, it matters even more for the judiciary. For the judiciary in Germany, you need very high marks to be taken in. So the bottleneck is small for women to get, or for women and men to get into the judiciary. And so more men than women get the training place of their choice or the occupation in the law firm where they want to work. And also this is why many women open a firm for themselves as single practitioners. And in practice, we observe many differences. So women are less specialized. Many in family and social work. In Germany, we have specialist titles for lawyers. And in Germany, 60% of the specialist titles for family law are in women's hands. And in social law, it's 48%. And amazingly, medical malpractice law is also a specialty for women, and everything connected to figures, tax law, but also company law connected to big money is the field for men. There, the share of women with the specialist titles is less than 20%. Women are partly unemployed or in part-time work, meaning that some want to have part-time work to combine family and work, but some are not offered a full position and have to choose part-time work. And women have more individual clients, meaning these individual clients often come from lower and middle social strata, meaning this involves less money, and the men have more corporate clients. So for women are the fields with less or little prestige, limited income perspective, but also greater emotional labor and precarious contracts. So in a sense, and these are categories I had put together for my presentation 15 years ago, and I've checked them, and they're still true. Women still are the working class of the legal services market, a kind of reserve army. They work on matters of lower visibility, profile, rewards, often in back offices. Mary Jane Mossman, a nice colleague from Canada, had called it, they work on the pink files. And in large law firms, as I said, women remain on the lower echelons of the hierarchies as associate or junior partner, non-equity partner, but not full partner. They have often an unattractive office environment if they don't work full time. And women also have, and these are very new data from Germany, less job satisfaction. Men work on matters with greater prestige, client contact, and with, I also have to move, more career prospects in front offices on what Mary Jane Mossman has called the baby boy blue files, and 50% of them move up to full partnership. And so we have, and I've checked that recently for a new article on women in the legal profession in Germany, we have a gender pay gap in the German legal profession between 10 and 40%. And that gender pay gap in the legal profession is much higher than the overall gender pay gap we have in Germany as a rule. So here's the picture on women in big law firms and their share in positions. So with associates, the number is a little bit higher. This is from 2017, but there is no new picture for 2020. Council, 31%, meaning those together make well, about a third now in the law offices, and non-equity partners 27%, and equity partners, and this has only risen by 0.4%, meaning we have now 11.1% of women as equity partners. So I talked, what are the deficiencies? I talked about social capital. How do lawyers achieve social capital? Well, through male socialization processes. That's bonding by sports, drinking, dining together. And women are less efficient in these kinds of networking, and they're also less efficient in mentoring. On Monday, I've given a talk to a Lions group of women, like Rotary Lions, and they asked me, what can we do to enhance our networking. And I said, or to become more successful. I told them, well, it's also always a question of visibility. Make yourself visible. Yeah, then the deficiencies, the family responsibilities. And well, it's banal to say, but it's still true, that in most cases women take more of the domestic chores, which cut back on careers. And for men, still domestic chores are a reason to aim for promotion as breadwinners. And the professional commitment for men is, I say now, rather fixed and unchangeable. We have a new generation of men who is more open to change. But for women, in any case, particularly when they get children, it's always negotiable. And that the consequence is mobility. And for women, it's sideways, out, downward, the revolving door effect. For males, upwards. But this mobility is not as marked as it was, but it is still there to a worrying extent. So this much about women as practitioners, as advocates. Now, women in the judiciary. I like this picture. On Monday, I told you I talked to the Lions women, and this woman is the president of these Lions women right now. She had invited me to talk. And these are 3 of 5 presiding judges of chambers at my regional law court in the city where I live. They have 17 chambers and 5 presiding judges on 17 chambers. Although the overall figure for women in the judiciary in Germany is 50% now. So women love the judiciary worldwide. As I said, the most recent reports I've read and dealt with are those about women in the judiciary in the Asia Pacific. The judiciary gives a high status, it has a high prestige, there is no income discrimination, you have a secure position unless you are elected. Of course, that changes the picture, but in Germany, you are a career judge, and in many other countries, no career steps are necessary because you have an elevated position, you have the social security of the civil service, you will get a pension when you retire, you have maternal and parental leave, you have the possibility to work part-time, and basically manageable workload. In Germany, let me talk to you about the disadvantages for women we have there. The leaders in the judiciary are the men. The presidents are the gatekeepers and the presidents of the first instance courts. In my federal state, we have 19 first instance courts in the what we call ordinary jurisdiction, which combines civil and criminal matters. We also have courts for labor law, administrative law, social law, and tax law. And of these 19 presidents, we have 15 men. And they're the gatekeepers and key players. They build the careers of the judges. And what is important for judges, again, is visibility. Visibility is so important for careers, and in our case also, they have to be prepared to take over administrative functions. We have discovered that women get lower marks in regular assessments in the judiciary, and this must be connected to gender stereotypical notions and maybe notions of women as mothers, because the judiciary only takes in women and men with special marks. They have to have very high marks. And so it's very amazing that in their assessments, they get lower marks. And the majority of women work at the local court of the ordinary jurisdiction of first instance, and there they are not visible. I've called it the women's trap, and they have a barrier to the regional courts. And so it's very difficult for them to get out of these courts to have a career in the judiciary. And to be a mother is a kind of career stop. You have this wonderful maternity and parental leave, but after that you are considered to be a mommy. The president may tell you, I have a nice position for you there, which makes it easy for you to combine family and work. And if they work part-time, they are considered to only have a part-time devotion. And also in the judiciary, like with practitioners, total commitment is something very important. And other career impediments, of course, time constraints, as in all higher occupations. Higher occupations are strenuous, and you have to make serious investments into your work. And for a career, you also have in the judiciary a long hours working culture, not only with the practitioners, also in the judiciary. And what is very disadvantageous for women, and that is in many countries of the world, is women need a mobility for a career. So they are sent to law courts here or there, and they can't stay at the law court where they live. I also know that from Latin American countries and also in the Asia Pacific, and for example, also Turkey. And as I said, networks and connections are not as good for women because networking demands a time investment. And the question is, do women want to invest the time? When I lectured on Monday, I realized suddenly some women got impatient. Yes, they wanted to get home to their family. And you would hardly have that with men. With some, yes, because these days more and more women demand the husbands to take, or the fathers of their children to take an equal share of the work, but still. And a problem also is that women may lack support. Women have an equal career motivation, and this is something very interesting, a psychological effect, due to the history we've had. Women trust less in their competencies. We call that a lower self-efficacy, and they trust less in their success than men. This we call lower perceived efficacy. Trust in competencies, less trust in competencies is because their competencies have always been questions. Less trust in success is because they've realized that a career is so much more difficult for women than men. And we also discovered, analyzing documents the judiciary gave us, that women there, and I think we can generalize it, only apply for higher positions when they had the relevant grade or the relevant experience for a longer time than their male colleagues. And well, we have equal opportunities officers and regulations in Germany and many countries everywhere, but in the judiciary, it doesn't play a role. It's a nice decorum. So a couple of words on women in the legal academy. I think this picture shows you a lot about the situation we have in Germany. We have 43 law faculties, and this is a picture of the annual meeting of the law faculty deans. And there are 4 women and I think 38 men here. And to show you that the situation in faculties is not much better, this is a picture from Passau. It's all pictures from 1 or 2 years ago. And there you have 2 women and so many men. This is not as bad in other countries. Our project on gender and careers in the legal academy has shown that the situation in Germany is really the worst in the legal academy. Nowhere you have that strict gatekeeping and that repulsion from women from the field. So what differences are from women to male law professors? There are differences in academic capital, the qualification and the examination marks. What matters in Germany is the number of publications. Women tend to have less publications. I always tell them, you have to publish. Women love teaching, is my experience, but teaching is not rewarded for a career in the academy. And we have enormous cultural differences. This is why many women don't want to stay in the academy. They have to work in insecure working conditions. They get limited working contract, and the discipline is authoritarian with dominance attitudes. And this is a hostile work environment for women. And women are still considered to be the others. There's a hard working of gender stereotypes. And so far, we only have in Germany 17% of women on chairs, on the big chairs we have. So this shows you this disastrous picture. It's different in other countries, but in no country we have as far as I know, we have a majority of women, at least not in the prestigious institutions. There is a strong social reproduction. I will show you a picture about social reproduction. A strong social closure, a strong construction of masculinities, and this is constructed in documents, for example, in Festschriften, biographies, monographs. We have analyzed obituaries about the image of the ideal law professor, and we have very amazing images of women and men in teaching materials. It's all, the teaching materials is all about women as housewives, being stupid, etc. And so the social reproduction works from master to pupil, apprentice. My interview partners tended to talk about my honored academic teacher, and chairs are organized as families. So the professor, the male professor as the father, the secretary as the mother, and then the sons and daughters. Several of my interview partners talked about my milk brother or my milk sister, terrible words. And then we have a strong do-it-this principle, what we call black writing, ghost writing, that the juniors have to write for the chairs. And so this is also a reason why it's difficult for them to get the publications. Well, this is a very pre-modern system. They don't talk about it, but it is still there. And if I look at my early publications, they're always Mr. So-and-so and a very important Ulrike Schultz, unimportant Ulrike Schultz. I could show you many pictures to illustrate what I've said. These are volumes on teachers of civil law, and these are the older ones, and this has been written by those who've been educated by the older ones, and you see these dignified men. And you may well imagine I never wanted to join the legal academy in Germany. For me, it was a system of old, dull men. But somehow I ended up there. Okay. So, yeah, the social reproduction, we have a strong working everywhere in the legal fields of the similarity principle. This cartoon says, I've been looking for someone like you. But of course, everywhere, having more than 50% graduating, they need the women. In the judiciary, they say, oh, we need the good young men now. What can we do to get the good young men? And last year, I was involved in an event at Hagen in Munich, the branch in Munich, but that was transmitted worldwide, about arbitration. And Hagen discovered, oh, arbitration, which was a very male field because high values are at stake. And suddenly they discovered, oh, all the young associates are women, because of course they have to hire women. They don't get enough men. And so they asked the questions, what's happening with us with all these women around? Will that change our work? And arbitration is an expanding work. So that is really a kind of serious situation. I've just had an article about it in the last issue of the International Journal of the Legal Profession. And so The question is, what happens with all these many women who are there and the more who are coming? Do they change the profession? Do they make a difference? So is there a more real life orientation? This woman says to this man, roll the thing, stupid guy. And that was the cover picture of the Festschrift for Jutta Limbach, our first female president of the Federal Constitutional Court. So, do women change the practice of law? We have dealt with all these questions extensively. Do women promote substantive justice? Do they have a more interdisciplinary approach? We have evidence for it. Ask Beatrice, who has evidence for it. Do they avoid the rigid application of universal rules, particularly in the civil law countries, and narrow doctrinal decisions? Do they redraw the boundary between the legal and the social? Do they see more the individuum and less the principles? Do they avoid contentious solutions? Do they more search for win-win solutions? When we do mediation, we have far more women in mediation courses than men. So do women make a difference? Well, of course, there's a strong assimilation in legal education and training, and there they're all trained to the neutralized image of the lawyer or the judge. They hold the equal qualification, and of course their primary identity is that as a professional. But here's some citations. They're a little older, but I also have newer ones. But I had the problem that some PowerPoints disappeared. I had forgotten to save my PowerPoint. Now I give you the older citations, but they're newer ones too. And when Sonia Sotomayor, I think it was in 2008, was proposed by Barack Obama as judge for the Supreme Court, there was a lot of uproar questioning her qualification. And she said, I would hope that a wise Latina woman with the richness of her experiences would more often than not reach a better conclusion than a white male who hasn't lived that life. So different life experience of men and women. And also Brenda Hale, who was the first woman in the House of Lords and the first woman in the British Supreme Court and then first president, has once written in an article, the incorporation of difference on the bench subtly changes and ultimately improves the judicial product. In our work in the 80s and 90s, we have used the theoretical principles derived from Carol Gilligan's work. Carol Gilligan is an educational psychologist and who's worked on gender differences, but I can't go into detail here. And then we've analyzed court cases, and I've gone on with it. So it's not old hats I'm selling here. I always have new findings for it. And so there may be differences in results, and difference in results, for example, in family law. In custody cases, women often have more sympathy with women at court. In alimony cases, men have more sympathy with women if women ask alimony, because they know that women may be in a weak economic position and maybe they still have a housewife at home, or they by and by this will change. And it has been discovered that often women show a more caring attitude, female judges, and write their judgment in a different way, longer, more detailed judgments, and taking into account more the female issues. In labor law, there is an extended work in the USA. Deborah Road has called it cotton mill industry, about sex discrimination, sexual harassment cases in labor law. And that was discovered that men, if you had a panel, men tried to transfer the competence in this case on their women, on the women on the bench, thinking that women are more qualified to decide on these questions. In administrative law, we've had empirical research in asylum cases that women are more generous to give asylum to overall women judges. And I've had a terrible case in Argentina, sorry, about abortion. Sorry, Beatrice can tell you all about it. And in social law, when I've done my interviews at the law courts, I ask, I always ask, have you discovered differences? And I got quite a nice range of examples. Not much. At first glance, they would always say, no, there are no differences. We are all neutral, objective judges. But when I went to the Social Court of Appeal, they said, when we had to decide on Viagra, should it be paid by the sickness insurance? There we had clear differences between men and women. Then we had difference in pension law, etc. And of course, in criminal law, you can analyze differences between criminal law, gives a broad gateway for sexist arguments, and you have to evaluate the personality of the wrongdoer you have there. And the question was, do women have more rigid or more lenient attitudes? We have empirical research which says, no, we can't discover it. We have empirical research which says we can. And in Germany, I have a very nice sample of the further education I've done in the Justice Academy. There we have given to judges made up cases on which they should decide what sentence would they give in these cases. And there it turned out, in the end, I had 300 decisions over many courses of further education I had done. And in these 300 cases, it showed that women had definitely given more lenient sentences. Well, you see, it's a slippery ground, but still there may be something, and we can discuss it. We have differences in the communication culture. I don't go into detail here. The question is, do women get the same respect or not? Recently, I had to go to a hospital, which is not the law courts, but hospitals may be compared to law courts in a sense. And I got a very unfriendly treatment there. And for me, the solution was very easy. They had stereotypical notions, what they could expect from these women. And so we have to observe the communication situation in law courts, and we have to deal with the communication culture. And so it's so important to offer communication courses to judges, but also lawyers, and also to deal with discrimination issues. Do women in the academy make a difference? I've spoken a little about legal profession, now judiciary in the academy, changes in law faculties, of course, the composition changes, the cultural changes. Yes, there are cultural changes. And well, if you're interested, I can go into detail later. Do they change the law? Do they deal with equal rights issues? Yes, they do, but not as much as I would like them to. And I had written a gender curriculum for law faculties, and I've written that in 2008, updated it several times, and only now it's discussed in the law faculties, and they're trying to find out whether they should include the subjects in their regular teaching. There is not much feminist stance and activism so far, but some, and it is growing, and that is important. And is legal education changing? Are women different as teachers of law? Are they nicer? Do they have more empathy? Because empathy is what everybody says is the difference between men and women. Do they have more caring attitude? If I see myself, I have just finished a course on gender and law. I was very caring, yes, and the students mirrored back, it's so nice that you are so caring. But of course, that demands an extra investment. But the question is, does this feminization also lead to a loss in prestige and income? And this is, it's not only in the academy, but this again, for all legal occupations. And this is something we have to observe closely, but we, the women, can't made to be the scapegoats for such a development. If there is a development for a lowering of income in German law faculties, comparatively, people earn less these days than like 20 years ago. In medicine is somewhat similar, but this is rather due to democratization processes and not to the feminization. That's my thesis. And so we have to do, I leave my slides a little in what I talk. We have to we have to deal with gender knowledge in legal publications. In Germany, we have so few serious legal publications, including gender issues. And if I teach gender and law, I have more women, hardly men, coming from other faculties than from the law faculties. We have to create gender awareness. And this is so important to do away with gender stereotypes. And well, I have cited that in an article. I had written an editorial for our journal for judges and prosecutors a couple of years ago. And a woman had commissioned it. I had 1 page to write something, and then the editor in charge wrote to that woman who had commissioned the article, here with the corrections for the editorial, the style of which strikes me as masculine and harsh rather than feminine and gentle. Never mind. She sent it to me and said, take it easy, take dynamite. No, but we, the women, and that's my last one, I was far too long. Sorry for that, but I can explain you why. We, the women, should not take dynamite. We have to negotiate our situation. We have to include men as much as possible, and we have to work on gender stereotypes, but also have to make men work on gender stereotypes. It can't be that all the burden of the work is on our shoulders, and we already have to take too much work. So if you want to contact me, I'm happy to send you whatever I've published, articles and also manuscripts of books. Sorry for being long. Let me explain what the situation was. At 6 o'clock, I had a call which made me very nervous. And then by some mistake, I don't know what's happened. I must have touched something on my laptop, and suddenly the PowerPoint was gone. And I only had saved it yesterday, but most of the work had been done today. And so I tried to reconstruct my PowerPoint, but of course in the brief time it was not possible. And as a rule, I have a long PowerPoint when I construct it, and then I shorten it. So just to explain you why I have talked too long, but I hope you can profit from all what I have said, and I'm available for any kind of question and comment.
Thank you, Ulrike. Thank you for your amazing presentation. and for the passion that you put when you talk about this issue. We do have some questions for you. Yes, yes. We do have some questions. The first one, it's related as how do you see the gender issue in the legal field comparing to other fields like the politics or the corporate sector?
Yes, yes, very good question. In politics in Germany, we have in our national parliament about a third of women. With the strengthening of the right-wing movement, the share is lower than we had it before, which is really nasty. But these women in politics really work for the situation of women. And in Germany, as I've said, we have a growing number of women who are qualified in these issues of gender and law, but not enough. And that is really a drawback what we have. In the United States, it's different. And their gender and law is really a valued subject. In Germany, it was considered to be sectarian. What do these women do? Law is objective, and we do not have to deal with women's issues. The corporate sector, of course, the corporate I know other professions. You had asked about other professions. We have the same situation we have for women in the legal professions in medicine. In medicine, we also have even more women studying medicine than men and than women studying law. I think 65% of those studying medicine are women now. But here again, we have the sticky floor and the problem of women getting to top position. So the what we call Chefarzt, chief medicines, the leading positions in hospitals are in the hands of men. So if we look at the economy, and if you see, we have about a share of 35% of women as founders of business. But if you look at it, women found tiny business, 1-person business, 3-person, 5-person business in special field. Bigger business is in the hands of men. And if women want to have a career in the corporate sector, this is really, really difficult. And in Germany, we have tried for 20 years now to get quota regulations for the corporate sector. We have quota regulations for the civil service and the judiciary, but in the judiciary, in practice, it doesn't work. but still, in the judiciary, we have about, well, in the higher paid positions in appeal court, a third is women now, so the figures are rising, but not in the proportion they should rise. And so now we have a quota regulation for the board of directors in companies in the corporate sector. But in a sense, it's still a voluntary quota because, of course, due to our legal regulation in civil law, we have the autonomy principle, and it's very difficult to give strict rules for companies. Things are changing a little, but very, very slowly. There is some pressure coming from outside, and particularly from the United States. It's not that the situation for women in the profession and in other occupations is so splendid in the United States, but the corporate sector is somewhat better there than, for example, in Germany. And so at Hagen Lovett's Germany, they told me, if colleagues from American branches come to us and say, oh, they're just men sitting, this is not the situation we want to have, and it has been reported about the banking sector. So some from outside says, next time we come, we expect you to have women dealing with us too, because when we come, women and men, and only meet men, then this may create an imbalance in our communication and negotiation.
Thank you very much. The other question is related to your research, and if you find any kind of legal framework that helps to improve equality in gender. For example, quota of people, of women for the judiciary, or some a regulation that helps women to get into the judiciary or to faculty laws.
Yeah, good question. In Germany, we have lots of regulation. As I said, we have equal opportunities officers in the civil service everywhere, in the judiciary everywhere. We have equal equality plans, equal status laws, whatever. And we always have to question what is the outcome of all that. There is some outcome. Of course, all these equal officers are there to give men maybe a bad conscience, to know that something has to be changed. And the quota, for example, is a kind of threat. And it works on a social basis as a kind of threat. It does work in middle career positions. For example, in the police, if you have mass advancements, giving advancements to many people at the same time on the middle level, there it works, but it doesn't work for leading positions. There they will always find possibilities to go around what the law says, or not to apply the quotas. Of course, we need the regulations, and of course, they've had some consequence. For example, to give you one practical example, we have a Women's Advancement Act in my federal state. We have, all federal states have it, and we have a federal Women's Advancement Act, and they've all been updated in the past 2 years. So 25 years ago, a colleague had tried to push me out of further education for the judiciary. And I wanted to do it. As I said, it was an important field for my work. And then in 1997, we got the first version of that Women's Advancement Act for my federal state. And it said, women should be occupied equally in further education. So I rang up the Academy for the Judiciary and said, sorry to say, I had offered courses, you haven't rehired me, what's the problem, etc., etc. And they had a look into the files. There was a new head of the institution, and that had been a very nasty story. And from then onwards, I got a good share of courses in legal education, in further education for judges and lawyers. There. This is just one example, and of course a lot has been done for part-time work, many things. And for example, at my university at some point we got a special amount of money. Some people got a special amount of money if their achievements had been good. And in my institute, I was the main producer of achievements, but I didn't get that bonus. I didn't get that bonus. And then I went to our rector and I said, sorry, what has happened there? And it turned out that only men had got it because the male breadwinner model is so deeply rooted in the back of the heads of these people. And so, of course, it's important to have these structures, but it's a very difficult work. You have to do it step by step here and there to achieve sensible results. And what has been really important in Germany is that we have a sound childcare system. Meanwhile, when I had my children, we only had kindergarten in the morning between 9 and 12. And we needed a system of full daycare for children. I had to hire a nanny, and all my salary for a couple of years went into my household stuff. And now the system is different. But of course, it's also strenuous for children and for parents, but still. So there are many things which have to be done. And the most important thing is the cultural change in society. And right now, with right-wing movements all over the world, I get a little pessimistic about cultural change. Right-wing movement in the US with Trump, right-wing movement in Germany. Well, our right party will probably get like 10% of votes, but still that's 10% too many. Right-wing movement Bolsonaro in Brazil, right-wing movement in Hungary, difficult, etc., etc. So, yeah, it's so important that we, the older women, have to keep on being active and also to influence the younger women and tell them the battle is not won. We have to go on fighting, or fighting maybe nasty, I think I'm a pacifist, convincing people to go on changing the society to a gender equal society. Oh, I can't hear you right now. You have to unmute you, Pablo. You're muted. Yeah.
Now you can hear me. Okay, Argentina has just passed a law, the Micaela law, la ley Micaela, that make it mandatory to public agents and judiciary take some training on gender issues that warrant gender awareness. What kind of characteristic you think that kind of training should have to be successful?
Yeah, again, a very good question. I have offered special gender trainings twice for the judiciary. We have a National Academy for the Judiciary and state academies. And I did it twice in the National Academy. And after that, I've said, you can't pay me enough money to heal the wounds I've got from this training, because these trainings are considered to be sectarian, to be not really needed. I had lots of old gentlemen sitting there who thought, all right, before we retire, we take an easy course. So they were sitting there listening to me, smiling at me. I'm thinking, it's all bullshit what she does. And so the important thing is to include these questions in any kind of training. And this is what I try to disseminate. And in any kind of publication, we have to have the gender test, other gender questions we have to involve and we have to deal with. Of course, it's nice in Cologne. I've just had this course, Cologne University, on gender and law. But as I said, I had 30 people attending. That was the number I could take. I had 6 women from law faculties, all the others were, well, I had young doctors, I had historians, social workers, whatever. And I had 28 women, 1 man, and 1 diverse. And so this is what happens when you offer special gender trainings. So if you want to include men, you really have to have it included everywhere. And so, of course, it's quite good if you can train trainers and tell them, look, here and there are gender issues you should deal with. That's what you could do. But special gender trainings are difficult to do, and you have to be very entertaining. I think I was entertaining, but still I felt bad at the end. And the point is not just to be entertaining, you also want to achieve a result.
One last question. We've seen in your presentation numbers from China and from India. How about and how you see if you see some changes in the Islamic world?
Yeah, indeed, there are changes in the Islamic world. For example, in religious courts, you had no women judges, and women were not allowed to represent clients there. By and by, in several countries, we meanwhile have women judges in religious courts. For example, in Palestine, there's a nice movie in English about the first women judges in Palestinian courts. I can send you maybe a link, I don't know. I've seen that movie. We have a very amazing situation in Pakistan. A third of the women judges in Pakistan are women. And also in other Muslim countries, and there's a very amazing factor behind it. Women are less prone to bribery. And this, for example, in Syria, we have hard evidence from Syria. This is why in Syria, women were hired particularly for the administrative courts because they were considered to be less prone to corruption. But and then another factor, of course, is if you have Muslim countries who get money from donor countries, or money from the EU, these donor countries and the EU will say you need working towards gender equality. Otherwise, you get cuts, and money is a very powerful instrument for social change. Oh yeah, and I forgot that to say, money also has led to a lot of change for the situation of women. At my university, I have profited a lot from special funding for women's research. But back to the Muslim countries, we still have 2 countries without women judges, Iran and Saudi Arabia. But even Saudi Arabia is opening itself up. So it's amazing that you have the changes there. And we have this volume on women judges in Muslim courts of law. And in the Onyati social legal series, online social legal series, there is one, I do not know whether it's already opened, but it will be opened soon, one virtual book also dealing with the Muslim countries. And that volume on women in the Asia Pacific has also included some Muslim countries. So globally, there is change. The speed is different, but something is happening, and yeah, this is good. And in China, well, China is a different story because China, communist country, and in the whole of the communist world, we had many women judges, And there we had a kind of reverse movement after the crumbling of the communist big communist empire, the communist world. And for example, in communist countries, the judiciary was of low reputation because they were authoritarian countries. And so there were many women there badly paid. And with the change we had since 1990 in these countries, the income structure has changed for women, but also more women go back into the judiciary. And in China, there's one amazing factor: the childcare facilities are less good now than in former times when the regime was more communist than it is now. Now it is definitely a capitalist communist regime, as we all know.
Thank you very much. It was amazing, really, your presentation, and again, your passion to speak about it. I will leave now the floor to Laura, that I will say the last words of the seminar.
Thank you so much, Ulrike. Bueno, gracias a todos por haber participado de esta actividad y los esperamos para la próxima actividad. Ahí les comparto el flyer, que será el día 25 de agosto, donde se presentará el Manual de Investigación en Sociología del Derecho, y también tenemos exposiciones sobre problemas de justicia transicional desde perspectivas sociojurídicas. Muchísimas gracias a todos y hasta la próxima. Gracias, Pablo, gracias al intérprete, maravilloso trabajo. Hasta la próxima.
Okay, and if I may say a last word, thank you for
Sure.
your
Okay, Ulrike.
Thank you for your questions. A little sorry that was a little long, but it was a pleasure for me to talk to you. And whenever there's a special subject of all I know, don't hesitate to ask me to talk to you again and to give you another presentation. As you see, I also have the political agenda to move forward gender equality globally in our societies. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ulrike. Your work is wonderful. Thank you very much.
Okay.
See you soon. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Bye bye. See you.
Bueno, no se quieren ir muchos, pero tenemos que terminar la reunión. Nos vemos entonces el 25 de agosto, como les adelanté, en la próxima reunión del seminario. Gracias, Ulrike, en español, una vez más. Maravilloso tu trabajo y sobre todo la labor empírica, ¿no? Que es para destacar. El trabajo empírico de Ulrike es grandioso, como ella es grandiosa. Gracias, muchas gracias. Estamos encantados de escucharte. Wonderful.
I hope the translation worked, that I was not talking too fast.
No, anyway. The translation was very good. Patricio is a wonderful translator.
Thank you so much.
Thank you to you, Ulrike. Bye.
Bye.
See you soon.
See you soon.